Hi folks, Tim here. Welcome back to Elmendorf Acres. Well, it's a little chilly. I think we hit about 40 degrees today. Got real cold last night, down into the very low teens last night. So not the best day for maple sap to run, but it was suggested to us that we do a how-to series and document start to finish exactly how we do our maple syrup. Now, I'm going to show you some of the way that we do it here. And we're basically a large hobby farm at this point as far as our maple syrup production. Last year, we produced almost 60 gallons of syrup. This year, we've added some taps, and we're hoping to hit about 75 gallons of syrup this year. But what I wanted to do was make this educational for you, especially if you wanted to just tap one or two trees in your yard and boil it down inside. So we do that with the kids. But first, here's the back hill behind my house. We've got two sets of main lines that run down this hill, and they empty into this IBC tote. Now, these are food-grade IBC totes. The inside have been sanitized multiple times, rinsed multiple times. And the outsides get a little dirty, but the insides are very clean, and that's really what matters. So we've got a run here. My notes on this, I think, are 104 taps we have between these two main lines that run into this tank, which is great. This hill is eastern facing, so these trees break free and run pretty early in the morning. Even on a day like today, with the heavy freeze we had last night, they will still run a little bit. So you can see, got some ice in there, but you can see that this one line is actually running a little bit. It was very slow today. We just had too much of a freeze last night. And of course, that's the top. They get kind of dirty sitting outside. But anyway, we use all food grade. Over the last few years, we have transitioned to food grade everything. I've seen a lot of people use the tidy cats or cat litter buckets, spackle buckets, things like that. But we've gone to entirely food grade. It's been a little bit of a process and not exactly a cheap one, but it's what we want to do. So we've been working on that. The back of the white truck here, I've got a 275 gallon truck tank. You can see that. Very, very handy for going around and collecting sap. A couple friends of mine tap in, and basically what they do is they do a backyard producer. They tap 8 to 10 trees, something like that. And once they hit a couple gallons of syrup, they're done for the year. So I talked to my one buddy, Jim, and I said, hey, would you mind leaving the taps in? I'll come collect it. And we're just trying to bump our syrup numbers a little bit. So the other day I dropped by his house and I was able to collect 40 gallons of sap. I did not test it yet, but it should translate to 3/4 or 1 gallon of syrup by the time we're all done, which is great. If we can do that 5 or 6 times, that really bumps our numbers for the year. Now I'll take you back here. The kids have been playing in the yard quite a bit, but this is our backyard here at the house. We've got a lot of the Japanese stilt grass growing up back here, so they've been raking that up and trying to add this area as part of a yard. So Jackson has been cutting at this old rotten stump, and then we've got our main line that runs through here. And I'll show you how I do our main line tie-ins with the saddles. We run 5/16 line, and I'll go over that real quick with you, especially if you're just starting out. You don't necessarily need the main line. We found it very helpful for us. We got a couple lines that run down here. This one I actually need to tighten a little bit. It sagged a bit, but they click in. They're very easy. These work very well, these plastic ones. I will say if a tree comes down, these plastic pieces will break and you'll lose sap. So you do have to monitor the lines, especially after windstorms. So what I wanted to do is bring you over here. Now these are the kids' trees. I don't tap these, they tap these. The taps are in for usually about 3 weeks, and we do these with milk jugs. Now there's a couple reasons behind the milk jug. Number one, I don't want to use my good buckets for the kids, mostly because I run out of them. But number two, from the house, I can look outside and see how much sap is in this bucket. And that means the kids can as well. So for the first couple weeks, they have a blast collecting the sap. And later on in the season, they don't have as much fun collecting the sap, but we push them and they get it done. But I wanted to show you exactly how this works for us. And this is why I say anyone can do this in their backyard. This is Daniel's tree, I think, or maybe Katie. There's one up there in the distance, and that's either Daniel's or Katie's. And this one is Jackson's this year. We try to switch the trees around a little bit. It is very, very common that your trees will run differently. Depends on the age of the tree, how much top it has, what the root system is like, and where it's tapped. Now you can see this one has some in it. We did freeze last night, so this bucket also has some ice in it. So it's a little bit, you can see right here, but we've got some ice in it too. Now, here's our spile. We use this style spile now. Oops, let me switch around here. So we use this style spile now. It's a 5/16 hole in the tree versus the 7/16, which is the old way of doing it. These work really well. You can see this dripping through. This tree started running, I think, about 4 hours ago today. Recording this right now, it's about 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. So, this is a perfect example of anyone can tap trees. These are the milk jugs that we use. We get our milk in, we drink the milk, we wash them out really good, and then the kids tap these. They collect them in a 5-gallon bucket, and we boil their syrup down inside. You can see we've got a line running up through the woods back there. That's a 5/16 line. So we made the transition a few years ago to all 5/16 fitting and all 5/16 line. Seems to work very well. I don't really see any less yield on a 5/16 spile than we did from the 7/16. And then this is our main line down. It's got a little dip in it there, which again, I've got to kind of fix that, but it does still work. Just with some sap in it. It just lets the sap sit in that low area by the archery target there, which freezes up. So I do need to fix that, but this is our backyard operation. About a half mile down the road, we've got another 200 taps or so out. And we have, as of right now, 290 taps out. I think last year we were about 250. So a good upgrade from last year. Still not where I want to be. We're working towards 400. I'm basically adding 50 a year just so I can kind of slowly figure out what's comfortable, figure out how much wood we need, things like that. And also I don't want to spend a fortune in line and fittings every year. So this way I can buy another 1,000 or 1,500 feet of line and set that up. So let's go on inside and I'll show you how we boil inside. All right, so here's the sap that the kids collected. This is from their trees. You can see this back pot just starting to boil, and this front one is not quite there yet, but these need to boil down. They collected about 6 gallons of sap, so we're hoping to see between those two about a pint of finished product. So I will, as this video goes on, you'll see the colors start to change. One thing that you can do if you are boiling yourself and really keeping a good eye on it, run about 2 or 3 inches in the pot. Don't fill it all the way up. We filled it all the way up so I don't have to watch it quite as close. It will also create a foam as it boils, and that's imperfections and impurities coming out. And any of the, like in this case, if we see here, there's a little piece of tree bark floating in it. So that will come out with the foam. So we skim that off a little bit. I don't run theirs through our fancy filters because way too much of the syrup gets wasted in the filtering process. All right, so you can see we've got a slight color just starting. We boiled down about 1/3 of each pot. So you can see there's a little bit of foam, and that foam is what you want to scoop off. It's got some of the impurities in it. See, as we get closer here, it's got a little bit of brown in it. And I just drop that in paper. paper bowl. Just do a little skim. Nice and simple. And this video is geared for those of you who want to do this as a small backyard project or a project with your kids. I will say, if you are boiling in the house, to be sure to run your range hood. This is a lot of moisture going in the air in your house. So you want to make sure that you're running your range hood. You can also do this outside on a little propane stove. On those camp stoves, you can do it with that, on chafing dishes, things like that. Or you can build cinder block little evaporators. A lot of people have done that with the chafing dishes as well. But this is a great way to do it with the kids. They can see it inside and they get to make their pint of syrup. Okay, so we're about 3 hours into boiling, and this pot here is completely empty. I just combined these two pots. There's about an inch in the bottom of this one. You can see a little bit of foam on that still. And then this is some of the foam that we scooped off the top. There's not a whole lot when you do these small batches, but we're down to this much sap. It's still sap, not syrup yet, from the initial 4 gallons or so that we started with between these two pots. So still a little ways to go. And I will show you the way that we test whether it's syrup or not, especially for these small batches. And a small batch like this, we actually don't filter. We pour this directly into the mason jar and we just let it settle for a couple days. That settling goes to the bottom, and you can actually eat the settling if you want, but you get nice clear syrup on top. So that's the way that we do these smaller batches. Okay, so one thing that makes life way easier is actually purchasing a canning funnel. So this is a nice option. It fits right inside just perfectly on your regular mouth mason jars. Of course, it works on wide mouth as well, but it works really well for this, and well worth the money to buy this particular funnel. I'm sure Amazon has it. We bought this one from a restaurant supply. Now let's come on over here to the stove. Things have really boiled down quite a bit. You'll see that the syrup itself, this is really closing in on syrup now. It's bubbling a lot more different. So you'll see that what we have in the pot here is really starting to bubble differently. You see how these bubbles are more glassy, I want to call them, and they're building up into more of a bubble rather than your typical boiling water. So we're going to stir it around a little bit, and then we take this and we go like that. And once it starts stringing off the spoon, that's how we know whether it's ready or not. And it's still a little watery. So we've got a few minutes to go. But there it is. That's a nice color for the kids. Like I said, we do not filter this because you'd lose almost all of it through those fancy filters. So this is going to go straight into the little mason jar. Now you can see we're actually starting to foam up. We are just about to syrup. And one thing you can do is put just a drip of butter or vegetable oil in, and that little bit of oil will coat the top and cause the foam to go away. Now all I did was I just touched my knife to the butter that is right next to the stove here, and you can see that took that foam right out of it. So you can do it with butter, you can do it with vegetable oil. They have defoaming powder for the big commercial guys. All kinds of different tricks you can use, but this is very, very close to syrup. You see those bigger bubbles forming here and here. That is just about there. And it happens fast. A couple minutes ago it was nowhere close. A little stir around here and see where we are. Not quite, but it is really, really close. So once you get to these bubbles, most people would say this is just about syrup. A lot of people would be happy with it. But once you see these big bubbles down here like that one and that one, we're real close to syrup. And I lowered the heat on this. I forgot to say that before. It's not on high heat anymore. It's more of on a medium heat. See that little tail just starting to form on this spoon here. Let's see if we can get a little bit of picture of it. See how that's just forming the littlest bit of a tail. That little bit of a stringy type look. Do it again. And that little string that forms, we've only got a short period of time more. And then this will be right down to actual syrup. So this was, I think, about 4 gallons. Is what they started with this one. They had some more, but I decided not to add it. I just wanted to do one single boil with them today. All right, so here we are. I want to show this really quick, and then I got to switch this over to the pot, or the, see that difference? See how it has developed that tail? It kind of, they call it sheeting off the spoon. That candy look almost. That's what you have when your syrup is done. And this is definitely for your backyard producer, your hobbyist, something like that. Look at those bubbles. See how they're very different than they were even a minute ago. Those are the bubbles of syrup that is ready. Yep, so there we are. There we have it. How to boil syrup down in your own house. Here, Jackson. You can film it done then. Like I said, this little canning jar is wonderful. Doesn't have to go in a hot mason jar. Doesn't need to at all. Again, this is for the kids. Not filtering it. There we go. And usually what Abby does is these pots that we do this little finishing in, she will make oatmeal with this tomorrow, so the syrup doesn't go to waste. And then one of the tricks is seal these down and make sure that you turn it upside down, because when you turn it upside down, it gets that super hot, superheated liquid up against the top of the mason jar itself, that metal lid that you put on there, and it sanitizes everything. So even though these have been washed and sanitized and everything else, that hits it all again, helps keep the bacteria from growing. Now, ideally, you would want this filled right up to this little glass lip. We couldn't do that today because we didn't have enough syrup. But again, it's for the kids, and as soon as this cools down enough, we'll let it settle for a couple days. It'll go straight in the fridge. You can see a couple little imperfections, impurities floating in it. It's definitely nothing that's going to hurt you, that's for sure. This stuff was boiling at 219 or 220. So one of the keys to maple syrup, and one of the ways that it's actually and officially become sap, from sap to syrup, is a little over 7 degrees. I believe it's 7.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Over boiling water is officially syrup. Now, when I'm using the hydrometer outside in the actual sugar shack, we're using a hydrometer to get it perfect. We're not using the spoon method, which is what we used in here. But again, this is for having fun with the kids, your backyard sugaring, things like that. You can see that we did pretty good. They got about 2/3 of a pint, which is great. Everybody's happy with that. A fun afternoon project for them. And it's something you can do in your own home. Now, when we're doing this outside, I've got 400 gallons of sap waiting to boil down right now. That's barely enough for me to even start the evaporator. So we're actually going to wait till we have 600 and then fire it down, or fire from there. But this is a great way and a how-to kind of start to finish. I didn't show the actual tapping process in this video, but this is an explanation of the tapping, the collection, and then how to boil it down in your own home. And again, make sure if you boil this inside, you have some sort of vent running, because you will have an enormous amount of humidity. I mean, if you think about that, we started with 4 gallons and now we're down to, 10 or 12 ounces. Well, that means there's almost, I'm not gonna do the exact math today, but almost 4 gallons of that moisture went into the air in this house over the last 3 or 4 hours. So it's something that you could do outside and then bring it inside for the last hour if you want. Or again, if you do it inside, make sure you have that fan going. So I have a toolbox full of all the stuff that I may or may not need while I'm working on tapping this. But this is our line tool. This thing is worth, to me, every penny out there. It's amazing. Saves all kinds of time. So you click your line in like that. Take your spile, again, it's just a clear spile. Hook it in there, straighten it out, just squeeze it in. Jackson is doing some filming here, but that's how easy that is. This is then a drop. If we were hooking this into a line, I would put a T on this end and then hook it in with the rest of the line. But we're not. We're just going to put a tap in and show you exactly how this goes. This line right here, you don't want to tap past that. That's kind of your maximum tap line. So that's, what, 3/4 of an inch maybe? So you don't want to bury these spiles all the way into here. You want to stop about there. That being said, you only want to drill 1.5 inches into these trees. I'm gonna go right about here. And I want to go into about here. I don't have this bit marked. This is not my normal tapping bit. You want to drill in on high, clean the bit out, and that's about 1.5 inches in. And look at it run already. That tree is just ready to run. Pull it back a little bit. So now for the tapping. You want to just, I mean, at least for me, I don't want to just hammer, 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 hammer. That's not how it goes. You tap it in nice and gently. Put your spile in. Pull the camera back a little bit. Put your spile in and just nice gentle taps. You want to be flat with it. See that difference? Hear that noise difference? It gets almost rubbery. That means that this spile is properly seated into this tree. So what we're going to do is when I come down later, I'll put a 5-gallon bucket in this one just to see how much it runs. But some of these older ones sometimes will do that. It is already running. You can see it's working its way here closer. And there it is. So it's running pretty good for a tree that's damaged. We've had a lot of just a deep freeze recently. So once these trees are warm today, they're really going to break free. So what you can do is you can tap in these trees with a 5-gallon bucket. You can do it with milk jugs. The kids do it with milk jugs. You can do, I don't see any from here right now, but you can do the old style metal buckets. We have those as well. But I mean, you can see it's actually, this is pushing the sap up through. And it'll be there in a minute. You'll see the pressurized in a minute. So what you can do is you can put a 5-gallon bucket here, put this right into the 5-gallon bucket. I've always drilled holes through the lid and I set the lid on. I put the bucket on a slight angle. That way any of the water runs off. Some people will put the line in through the side of the bucket. Just make sure you don't seal the bucket all the way. But this is 100% pure maple sap. That's what it looks like. That's how easy it is. This is the easiest part. I say that seriously, but it is true. This is the easiest part. We have not boiled any sap. We have made no syrup yet this year. I've got about 100 hours into this for 300 taps. So it's definitely a labor of love, not exactly a big money maker, but it's fun. I did it with my grandfather. Kind of a family tradition, and the kids are doing it with me. But that is how you drill into the tree and you seat the tap. Again, it's really simple. You don't want to drill 6 inches into the tree. You don't need to. It's that first inch, 1.5 inches that you're going to get your sap from. So the average tree you drill 1.5 inches into. If they've got real thick bark, that's where I'll do 2. Some of these older trees that we have a really thick bark, so I'll have to drill in a little bit more. But you drill 1.5 inches, 2 if it needs it, and you seat that spile just like that. You just tap, 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 and well, we can see that we've got, it's pushing it out, and the line is above the spile. So anyway, you tap it until it gets that little rubbery and that hammer bounces back. So very simple to do, fun to do. The other thing that's neat is you can drink this sap. You can refrigerate it and drink it. I like it. I drink it all day long when we're boiling, but we actually take some, we filter it, and we put it in the fridge and keep it. So what I want to do here today is go over lines and how to install them. When I started a few years ago, I looked for all kinds of videos and nobody had a real helpful video on exactly how to install lines. Now, one of the things I've learned over the years is that as the tree warms up for the day, it actually creates a positive pressure that pushes the sap out of the tree. So having super, super tight, full gravity lines, maybe not quite as important as I originally thought. It definitely helps with the flow, and a downhill line is definitely what you want, but it will actually push up and around loops and things like that, which is definitely interesting. As long as you can see here, we've got our 55-gallon drum. So you can see here we have our 55-gallon drum. This is a food grade drum. I've got 3 runs of 5/16 line going into it. The first run off to the left has 7 taps. The second run has 8, and the third run has 12. So we've got a pretty good amount going into this barrel. You can see this one goes way back up into there. But you can see from here that it does graduate uphill as we go, which is really what we want. The same with this line here. We've got 2 of them side by side, so it's a little bit tricky to see it up this way. But as we come back here, you can see way up there, I gain about 20 feet from where the first tap stops at the end of that line, which is, I think we've got about 150 feet in this line right here, zigzagging. So I've got a 20-foot elevation gain there that's going to create a nice vacuum for me. And this one here doesn't have nearly as much of an elevation. I think I've only got a 4 or 5 foot elevation from where we start this run to where this barrel is. So not quite as good, not perfect. So really what we want to do is have, you know, 5, 6, 7 taps going into a 5/16 line and then a main line. The problem is this is a new area for us to tap. We haven't tapped down here since I was just a little older than Jackson. So we haven't tapped down here in about 30 years. I think 28 to be precise was the last time my grandfather and uncle tapped down here. So this is, it's been a long time since there's been people down here other than hunting. There's been a long time since these trees have been tapped. And as you can see, we've had some wind damage down here. Those big root balls in the distance there. That big, larger tree laying down, that is a sugar maple. That big root ball in the distance has 2 sugar maples. This is an older blow down here close. That was a sugar. This is a very heavy sugar area for us. Some of the tops they're laying down up there are all sugars. So we had a storm come through, I think 12 or 13 years ago, that did a lot of damage. And then we had one again either last year or the year before, and that's what took these couple down. It actually came through here and went right down this way. There's my truck in the distance and our lovely boulder. The kids love playing on that. But it went right down in through here and ran the valley. So it was some sort of microburst and did quite a bit of damage. Unfortunately, our maples took a beating. This area down here has a potential of about 120 taps on semi-mature trees. You know, we're tapping only 12 inches or greater. So if we went with that 8-inch mark that some of the producers are doing now, we could add probably 30 or 40 taps. But right now we've got 100 to 120 tap potential down here. And I'll have to do my numbers to see exactly how much we gained. Our goal this year was to crack 300, somewhere in the 310, 320 range, which I think we're just about there. But anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about today, and that is how to set up your line system. So the first thing I did here today, and I'm going to use this run as an example. Come over here and use this run as an example. I tap around the entire tree. We tap 360 degrees around the tree because you want to move your taps around your tree year by year. The other thing that we do is we zigzag through the trees, which helps create a tension. That tree helps create a natural tension with friction. So you can see we go around this side of this tree. You can't actually see the other side of this one here, but around the other side of this tree here, there's another sugar. We wrap around that, we hit that smaller one, wrap around it, hit the bigger one, and then we go up the hill. But you can see we've got a gravity flow here. So we did have a problem with this one. Jackson was actually helping me. You can see where we've got some seepage around this. That's not good, but when we were putting it in, the tap snapped off, so I had to re-drill it, put another tap in. I never want to put another hole in the tree. So even though we're gonna only get a little bit from this, we still wanted to put a tap back in it. I didn't want to go around the tree and drill another hole, although this tree probably would have supported that. Now let's go over here. This is the smallest size tree we will tap. This has old tap marks. Interestingly enough, this has old tap marks from when my grandfather did it almost 30 years ago. This one is not running yet, but you can kind of see how far in we go with that tap, not too far in. And what we do is we run the drop. This is called the drop. We run the drop and we hook it in with a T here. The nice thing about these T's is later on at the end of the year, we will pressurize these lines and use a light bleach solution and run bleach through these lines, flush them out, and then I can pop that tap and I can cap it like this and let it sit for a week or two with the bleach in it and then drain it. Let's come up here. So here you can see what I was talking about, how we wrapped this tree. This tree I remember collecting buckets off of when I was Jackson's age. Down here always was done with buckets, so we had no way to drive a vehicle down to actually be able to collect anything. Bring the hammer up here, bud. So what we don't want to see is seepage around these taps. You know, this one's dry. It's not running really yet, but we want to make sure that we're seated properly here. Let's take a look at this larger tree. This tree I could have done 2 taps on as well. We're not hurting for taps, so that's why I did not do it. Let's see. Also not running. Let's go up to this one. So we had a real cold spell here. It's also interesting, you can hear the leaves crunching. It is dry in these woods, so I'm a little bit concerned about that. But there's not a lot we can do about it. Anyway, hey, don't tap it in, I'll do it. So you can see how far we seat these in. There's a little mark right there, and we only seat these in about 1/2 inch. So these are seasonal spiles. We pull them, we flush the lines, we cut them, and we put new ones in every year. It helps the bacteria in the tree. And here's a better view of that blowdown. One of those smaller ones was a sugar, and that larger one there, all the way up in there was a sugar. It's almost tempting to get a big machine down in here to see if we can pull it back, you know? I'm sure it would never work though. So here's our downhill run. From here, we drop down. So that's your gravity lines. They work well. It works well because somebody like us, we've got over 300 taps out now, and to collect 300 buckets, especially through woods on this terrain, is a little bit difficult. So that's one of the reasons we went to lines. We can also leave them up all year. This is our property, so we can leave these up all year and just flush them out. There is sap flowing through this. You see a couple bubbles in there, so there's fluid in there. It runs down our drop line. And like I said, we can have these lines like this a little bit. It doesn't hurt it if it's not perfectly tight. So by doing this and a longer drop, it allows me to move around the tree next year when we're tapping. So this year we tapped this tree here. Next year I'm going to want to either go up or down and about 1/3 of the way around the tree. So next year I might tap it here, I might tap it up here, or I might tap it around the back side of the tree. Again, this is a tree that has last been tapped over 30 years ago. It's absolutely amazing how slow our sugar maples grow around here. So we're tapping stuff that oftentimes I would just leave if it wasn't my property. If we were tapping on somebody else's, I would leave it. But I also know that these trees have been tapped for many years already. So that's your drop line. You can see, hopefully we can see, that little bit of fluid that's running out of that sap, or that tap, that's sap running out of the tree. So again, this is kind of a how-to on your gravity lines. Make sure they are downhill. It'll push uphill a little bit, but overall you want everything running downhill, which is rather important. This area took pretty heavy damage. We just haven't been able to get down in here and clean things up yet. We were able to clean up the other levels mostly, but it takes a while to get it all done. And while we're here, let's look at some of the beauty of the rocks. Can you tell I love being outdoors? I love the woods. A little hard to see the rock outcroppings, I guess, with the sun. Try to give you a little blockage here. There we go. Put my hat in the way. Now you can see them a little better. So one of the ways we keep tension on these lines is just a really simple slip knot. We double it up, slide this through, and tie it around the tree. I leave enough room for the tree to be able to grow. This line here is like this on the other side. It's just for our other line in. But the nice thing about these is you can slide this knot up the line as you pull the line tight. So it kind of allows you to endlessly tighten this line here, which is important. And then you can see I just ran it through here just so we have a little extra support. So we got a little bit of sap running. Let me see if I got, oh, here we go. A little bit of sap running. You can see it. See the bubble coming through. There we go. So we are running today. It's slow. We did just start this. That's actually just about half full, that whole line. So that's great. All right, so here's one of the lines that's usually in the barrel. This is slightly uphill right now, but you can see where that sap, let me actually come from this side so the sun shines through. You can see that sap is actually pushing its way uphill right now because it's pulling a vacuum everywhere above, and we've got that pressurized inside the tree. So the tree is pressurized, it's pushing that sap out down our lines. Plus we've got gravity helping us, and we've created a vacuum, and here it comes. So this is, I believe there's 7 taps on this one. We're doing pretty good today. It's a great day for it to be running. But there's, like I said, 7 taps on that line. So that's running pretty good right now. I'm happy with that. Now for planning, as far as when you're actually doing this, make sure that you have a way to pump out of these barrels. We have a pump that will pump out of these barrels. We have a machine that can come down all the way down in this woods. This is about a half a mile off the main road, or off any paved road really. So we can come all the way down in here with our UTV and collect this, which works great. I've got an IBC in the back of that, and that's how we collect all these. I've got a 55-gallon drum here. It is not uncommon for a tree, when it's really running well, to dump 2 gallons of sap in a day. So if this is a 55, I don't want to put much more than 25 taps into this. I think this run right now has 26 or 27, something like that. That green barrel up there, I think we had 21 or 23. I keep all the notes. That way I can kind of keep track of how things ran and what the differences were year by year. Okay, now, really important, how to identify a sugar maple. Now, we grew up calling them hard maple and soft maple. So basically hard maple was your sugar maple, and soft maple was a silver maple or a red maple or anything like that. So one of the things we look at when we are doing this, and one of the things I want to teach you, is how to properly identify a sugar maple versus the soft maple or a red maple. And branch structure is a big part of it. I can look up at the tree and basically just by the branches know whether I'm looking at a hard maple or a soft maple. However, I've got years and years and years of experience doing that. Not everybody has that kind of experience. So branch structure is different, but it's really hard to see from a camera from the ground standpoint. Usually when we're tapping, the buds have started to swell just a little tiny bit. And the buds between a hard maple and a soft maple are very, very distinctive. Now, we have a very young sugar maple here. This little skinny little guy right here. So with this tree is, my grandkids are gonna tap this thing, maybe if it lives. Okay, so as we look for these, this is a little tiny bud that sprouted off the side of a sugar maple right here for whatever reason. It sprouted out a little bit. I want to try to zoom in a little bit here. If you'll see, that bud has a little bit of a spear type look, and that's the only way I can describe it. Let's see if that works any better. But it's got a pointed tip. Now, as we look at a red maple, which I would love to find a red maple here somewhere. We have one back at the property. We've got lots of red maples, but I don't see any with buds close to the ground. So it makes it a little bit harder to actually describe the difference. But the red maple or your soft maple has more of a rounded bud, and it's very pronounced. So as you look up into the tree, it's almost like there's little bulbs at the end of these branches. Now for me, I tap only the hard or only the sugar. A lot of the bigger producers are tapping any type of maple tree. If it's a maple tree, they're gonna tap it on the way by. And that's fine, that's what they wanna do, that's great. Every maple has a sugar content. I don't have the reverse osmosis, so I want the most sugar content and the most bang for my buck, as they say. And by mixing a red maple in with the sugar maples, the sugar content does go down. The red maple has much less of a sugar content. So that's why we tap only the hard maple or the sugar maple. That's a little bit on the identification. So you're getting a nice little tour. My grandfather used to bring his truck down here. Had 55-gallon drums in the back of the truck. Put chains on to get down here. Many years ago, we did all kinds of crazy stuff back then. So this little cluster right here, including that one that's kind of buggered up, this whole little area here is sugar maples. And they have what I would say a very distinctive branch structure. Those are smaller ones. We didn't tap these this year. I'm just running out of time. All right, I found a red maple. So, still a maple. If you're doing it in your backyard, you can definitely tap this one. This is a red maple. We've got some gypsy moth caterpillar eggs. We've been getting rid of those where we can. But this is a red maple. It also has a dead hemlock at the base of it. But as we go up, let's see here if I can get a good shot of it. As we go up, at the end of these branches, right where the bud is, it's got a little bit more of a round bud. Anyway, that's a red maple. Also, the bark is a little bit different. That's a little harder because bark is so different on each tree. But that's more your soft maple bark. And then over here, we have the hard maple bark. You can tell it is just a little bit different. Again, you can tap all the way around these trees. Oh, here's a perfect example of a red maple or a soft maple. This nice straight one right here goes way up, way up. And that's a soft maple. And then right next to it, this guy right here is a sugar. So you can see the branch difference. The structure is different. The buds, hopefully you can see that in this video. I apologize if you can't, but they are a little different. So before I forget, tapping trees is something that you can do with basic household tools. I've got a DeWalt drill, but you can do it with any drill. I would recommend a sharp drill bit, maybe even buy one specifically for tapping. They clean out faster, they give you a cleaner hole in the tree, which is important. But if you have a basic drill and a utility knife and a hammer, then you're basically ready to go. You just need some spiles. And if you decide to do the tubing, only doing a couple fittings, not a big deal to do it all by hand. You can warm up the tubing with some warm water and make your connections that way. Otherwise, if you're doing a bunch of fittings, I would recommend that fitting tool. It works well. I believe that's the one made by Leader. There's a couple different versions. The Line Viper, I tried that one. I did not like that one at all. That was a loaner at one point, which was better than nothing. But after trying a couple, we settled on this one. And you know what? It was money well spent. It saves me tens of hours in the woods every year, and that's a big deal. So, just a couple thoughts on that. You can do it with your kids with very, very simple and very limited supplies. Okay, so you might recognize this from earlier in the video. This is where we were running lines. And you'll see that everything is still up. It's running well. And we actually had about 3/4 of a 55-gallon, excuse me, 2/3 of a 55-gallon drum. So that's great. Things are running well with that. And here's our little setup. I use a Milwaukee transfer pump. Again, we do all food grade stuff, so all food grade tubing into our collection tank in the back of the truck. And this works really well. This is how we do it. And if we're collecting with the buckets, I keep a 5-gallon bucket with me. That way I can go into the woods as I'm pumping here and collect a couple of those 5-gallon buckets. It saves a little bit of time doing a couple things at once. You can hear that pump is getting ready to die. Soon to change out the battery. But getting down in here, it's kind of a goat path. Anyway, we ran really good yesterday. I'm hoping for another good run today. So here's our other method of collecting, the old school metal buckets. This is a lot more work to collect, but it's a lot less work when you initially do the setup. This is a great way to go if you've only got a few trees, or if you have a couple where it's not practical for the tubing to run to. You can see these are metal spiles, metal buckets. We got the little metal roofs on them. Let's see if we can get in there and see. Yeah, we're still dripping a little bit. Now I take these metal buckets and I just dump them right into our 5-gallon bucket. That way I don't have to make 3 or 4 trips. A lot of times I can get 2 buckets per, and this is the type of spile that we use on that. And that just hooks right over. There we go. And this is the nice way. It's the old school way. Everybody kind of likes seeing that. And one of the fun things about the old buckets is listening to the sound of it dropping. I love that sound. You get a lot of trees right next to it. Whole bunch of them all next to each other. It's like an orchestra. Anyway, there's another one of our collection spots. I've got to head there next. You can see a bunch of tubing. We've got an old thermometer on a tree. That way I kind of have an idea of what temperature is down here. And there's the truck all the way down there. Well, this is a special day every single year. And if you're going to watch our channel for the next couple of years, you're going to see how excited I am on this day. This is the first boil. At least hopefully it's going to be our first boil of 2024 maple season. I would say I live all year for this day. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there is a lot of truth to it. I absolutely love it. It's something that I usually do with the kids, but they're at co-op today with Abby for the Tuesday homeschool group that they do. And so I'm here alone in the sugar shack today, which is not ideal, but we are going to make it work. Again, I love it. It's something I used to do with my grandfather for, well, as early as I can remember. I remember him doing maple syrup. And my uncle mentioned the other day, he's pretty sure that when my grandfather started out, he actually hand whittled wooden spiles. So yeah, to say it's in my blood is an understatement. So step one for us is going to be to flood this evaporator. We had An absolute amazing run yesterday. It actually ran again last night. We had a freeze up at the property, which is good because we're going to have some warmth coming in. And I want to have a good solid freeze before we get that warm again. But right now, we've got 670 gallons of raw sap sitting here at the house or at the sugar shack, and we got to work on boiling that through. I'm going to flood this evaporator, and then I'm going to have to go back out and collect some of the buckets because they are brimmed. But I was out of room in our storage tanks, so I got to flood the evaporator first, go collect, and then I'm going to come back and fire up. But let's go over what I do here as far as the first steps for flooding this evaporator. Now, after cleaning everything the other day, you can see that we've got everything capped off. And that's just to try to keep the dust out as things blow around. I put a 5-gallon bucket here, right? This has got this little stack here. And that's the exact same thing that's up there. It's just a steam stack. But I like to put the bucket over it to keep it from any dirt and dust from going in there. Because as careful as we are, as clean as everything was the other day, there is still dust. You can see there's a little bit of dust on this. So there's always dust kicking around. Now let's go out here and let's fire this thing up. So we keep our nurse tank, this is what we call our nurse tank, and this is an food grade IBC tote. I just topped it off the rest of the way. It's got some ice in it, which is great. I'm really happy about that because that's going to help keep everything nice and cold. And we've got our quarter turn valve here that I'm going to crack. Good, there we go. Okay, so theoretically that runs through here. This is a little bit curved here. It really doesn't matter. There's plenty of gravity. I've got another quarter turn valve here. So I got multiple safeties in line as far as if something in the evaporator fails, I can shut it down. So that quarter turn valve has been opened. Now we run over here to our preheat hood. I have this quarter turn valve open. I have this one closed. And really what I want to do is kind of see how everything looks, make sure I don't have any leaks. That's really important. I can run this system without the preheat hood if we have to. I can bypass it right here. I can close both this green valve and this green valve, and I can bypass right through, which is a good option, but the preheat hood really, really adds to just how efficient this evaporator is. Now let's take a look in. Let me open this other door over here so I can get a little more light. There we are. So this is all nice and shiny clean. It will not be this clean again until we are done for the year. But the evaporator is all nice and shiny clean, ready to go. All right, let's do a little, let's open this other one up here. Now the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to have a little bit of stuff come out of this valve here, and this is just a dump valve, but it will flush whatever garbage we have. Let it run through. Sounds like everything is working. There we go. I'm just going to shut it down again just for a moment. So what I did is I spun this green handle here just to shut it down, make sure this whole preheat hood is full. That way I can see if we have any drips. And I always flush the line system like that. We clean things at the end of the year, but you always get just a little bit of whatever in there over the course of the year. So I've got my head in here, I'm looking in here, I don't see any leaks, I don't hear any leaks, which is wonderful news, better than one of the other years. So I'm going to spin this valve back open, and here we go. And you can see it pouring out of this here. You can kind of see how it works. I'm actually going to lower the pressure on this just a touch, just so it flows in a little bit slower. But basically what happens is it comes in through this pipe here, it does a bunch of zigzags in this preheat hood, comes back out here and down, follows this pipe down, and then comes back up through the bottom of our float pan. And it comes into this divided part right here. It then flows, you see that nut there, it flows from there into the main part of the evaporator. That box in the back is where this flows to, that rectangle box. And what you'll see here, I'm gonna put the camera right inside, so it's gonna be a little echoey, I apologize. That plug right there, I can let sap out that side or this side where this pipe is, and that decides exactly where the sap goes. So it goes into this box, it's like a distribution box, and that decides where my sap goes for the day. Now this is a reversible flow pan. We're going to turn this back on. This is a reversible flow pan. So every day I want to change the flow. I want to flow in this side, or as we're looking at the front of the pan, let's look at the front of the pan. As we're looking at the front of the pan today, oh, see, that's why we listen. I have my drain open. There we go. Anyway, so the front of the pan today, looking at the front, we're flowing in the right side. When we boil next, we're going to flow in on the left side, and it just reverses the flow. It pushes any of that niter and that sugar sand out, and that's fully reversible with the front as well. So if I'm dumping raw sap into the back pan on the right side, I'm going to be drawing pure syrup off the right side. If we're dumping raw sap on the left side, it goes all the way through the evaporator, zigs back and forth, and then comes in this side here. Comes in here, goes through, and it goes back and forth, and we draw off the left side. So just kind of a neat note. We're just looking at things, and we want to make sure everything is working. Last year we had some leaks in the pan. Not seeing anything this year, which is good. Last year we had a red food grade silicone that we used to seal a couple things. This year I've got a clear food grade, which looks a little nicer. But this little divider here was actually leaking last year. So basically what we're waiting for is we are waiting for this big pan itself to fill up to where it starts coming up this sight glass here, and it'll come up between these two lines. We marked these lines here as safeties. This is the low line, this is the high line. If it gets above this, I lose efficiency. If it gets below this, I risk burning the pan. But what happens as this fills up, there's a simple hole that they cut right through here on the side of the pan, and this float raises and lowers based off of how much sap is needed. So that's what we're waiting for. We're just waiting for this sap to come through here so I can adjust this float if it needs it. It should be somewhat set from last year, but we did clean everything, so there are adjustments. These floats get niter build up on them, so they get a little heavier, so we always have to adjust afterwards. I guess you can't see it super well, but this is all raw sap flowing in here. It goes through that hole there into that distribution box, and then we're just waiting for it to start flowing through here. It should do that any second. Let's bring the camera over here where we've got less sun glare. It should start flowing through that little hole there any second. Ah, there it is. And as soon as that happens, we should start seeing our float move, which will then help close this plunger valve. And it looks like so far we're working, which is good. It is slowly lifting. As we look at this, it's a little hard to see with the camera, but this is lifting, and when this lifts, it closes that plunger valve over there inside the fresh sap intake. And now, sorry for the fast camera movements, but we're going to come over here, and you can see our sight glass is right about halfway, and we want it to come to right about there. So hopefully this is somewhat close to where it was last year. We're going to hope. It is slowing down already. Seems to be working. Oh, see that? There we go. That's what I wanted to see. It is working properly now, which is good. And hopefully here, in a couple seconds, it will stop flowing in. If it doesn't, then I have some adjustments that need to be made. So this is step one for our evaporating for the day. So what we're going to do is we're going to flood the front pan. Everything looks good in the front pan. It's stopped, or close to stopped. It'll, there's a lot of head pressure here. So what I can do is I can come over here and hit my valve. There we go. And that works just fine. So now we're going to come over here and we're going to flood the front pan. And this works very similarly. It's got a boiler valve over here that we open up. And you can kind of see how it works. So we're just going to let that flow in. Take a look at things. Alright. So we can kind of see how everything works here. You can see how it flows through this front pan. And then it works its way over to there. Pretty simple. At least if you ask me, it's pretty simple. And then we draw off over here. And we do have a thermometer over here. And that's going to help tell us when we're close. It's a good guide. It's flowing in. So when everything is working right, and this, once it's heated up, these gaskets tend to seal better. Once it's heated up, they tend to seal better. And you got to remember, these have been sitting all year, so I might have to replace gaskets. If I do, I have spare gaskets. Usually I can get 2 years out of a gasket, but we'll see. The front pan we like to have at about 1.5 inches, somewhere in that range. And that is getting close. If it goes much more than that, alright, so that slowed down. That's kind of what we wanted to see. I adjusted that. This one was very different. This had a lot of niter buildup on this particular float. I'm just going to shut this boiler valve off because I don't want everything to flow out. But my goal was to flood this pan, make sure everything looks good, and then we can do some testing. Make sure we got no leaks. I'm going to open this back up. I needed some room. It takes at least 25 gallons to flood this pan. So long gone are the backyard days that we used to do where when we had 25 gallons of sap, we could start a boil. Now I need 25 gallons just to fill the pan. Our average boil is 8 to 10 hours. And in those 8 to 10 hours, we should be able to move over 300 gallons of sap. Between 300 and 400 if everything is operating correctly. Today is a nice clear day right now. It's going to rain later. So I expect our efficiency to be high this morning and a little bit lower this evening. So that is step one for us, and that's what I call flooding the pan. So we put all that sap in there, make sure we have no leaks. And then step two is going to be actually lighting the evaporator off. Okay, first fire of 2024. Just started getting a little breezy, unfortunately, but we'll make it work. There we go. So I opened the stack. I want to open this a couple clicks on the bottom here, a damper. I usually run it about 3. And let's see here. Looks like we're ready to go. Time is 12:56. So we're going to time that and see when our first tendrils of steam decide to start coming out here. I'm just going to close this up. Reach into this side. There we go. There we go. All right. So it's started. I need to remember to turn the sap back on in a minute. But we'll time that and see where we're at steam-wise. Okay, so the first tendrils of steam at 102. I believe I had said 1256. They actually started at 101, but it took me a minute to get the camera on. So 5 minutes, and we've already got steam coming out. You can actually hear, I'll put you nice and close here. You can hear the boil start, so that's great news. We're getting things kind of evened out. It's going to take a little while to get everything straightened out and ready to go. But first boil of 2024 is underway. You see we got oil starting in the pan here, the front pan, which is our finished pan. The back pan is really where all the magic happens. And that's not really boiling yet, but it will be soon. It is steaming though. So we're doing well underway. Open this back up. It's going to take a little bit to get all this situated. There's a lot of playing around as we work on things. Okay, so it took a little while to get everything set up. It is 1:18 now. So we're 22 minutes after I lit the evaporator. We got a great rolling boil going in the front pan, the back pan. All the automatic floats have been semi-adjusted. I've still got some more work to do on them, but they are at least starting to run right. Let's see here. You can see in the back pan a little bit. Get a good rolling boil all the way across. So that's nice. It foamed up right away, which is normal. I had to hit it with a little defoam. Close that up. You can see the steam. Really good steam today. It's really a good day so far for this. And back out here so you can see. Here's all our wood lined up. That was like a half tote. That one's almost full. That's full. That's full. That's full. And I got probably 15 more. But the steam is evaporating really quickly today, which is actually nice. That's going to give us a lot better evaporation rate. So it's a little bit breezy now. Supposed to be a storm rolling in later, but I don't expect to draw too much syrup off today. The first boil tends to be just to get that front pan ready. Usually we boil at least 200 gallons before we make our first draw off that front pan. So it's going to take a little while to get there. Things are smelling warm in here for the first time of the year, so they always smell a little funny as you burn stuff off. We did new rail gaskets. This is a channel that runs all the way around the inside of the hood, and this is all condensation, so that's basically distilled water that's running off into that bucket there. This is our float box for the front pan. It's starting to level itself out. It's not all the way there yet. Still got some work to do on that, but we're getting there. That's my cheater stick. That way I can do a quick glance and make sure I'm not too low. And around here, there we go. So where that line is cut is about where I want this pan to be. And we're just about there. We're less than 1/8 of an inch lower than it should be, which is fine. We got our float, our sight glass there, and then our float box in the back, which seems to have worked itself out pretty nicely. Takes a little while. Everything needs to get up to temperature before it really runs right, and that's also condensation off the back. So let me take you out. Actually, I got to put some wood on the fire here quickly. This is very hard to do by yourself. Every couple minutes you need to put wood on this fire or else you'll lose your boil. Usually I've got somebody here with me, but they're on a job. So it's pretty much a raging inferno. We melt through these welding gloves fairly quickly, but the key to a good evaporation rate is flame. You want a lot of flame. So crisscrossing, splitting stuff small. We burn pine and hemlock for this mostly. Every now and then, if I need a little bit of heavy heat, I'll throw some cedar in there. There we go. That'll keep it for a minute or two. We'll walk around the back, and I'll show you the whole holding setup. This is just some of the work area. This will all get worked around a little bit more. Stuff will get moved as we get going. Behind here, we've got what we call our nurse tank. That's up there. I've got a tarp over it to keep some of the sun off. You can see the smoke coming out. It's like a freight train. So this tank holds 275. It's what I've got in it right now. When we flooded the evaporator, we put 30 into that. So we've got 305 between the evaporator and this tank. Now, I've got 110 gallons in the back of the UTV right now. I put that piece of steel up because it was in the sun earlier, so I wanted to keep some of the sun off it to keep it cool. We've got about 205 or 208 at the bottom of our hill in this tank. And then over there in the back of my truck, I've got another 250. So we've got a lot of sap here that needs to be worked through. I think I did the math earlier, and we're somewhere in the 875 gallon range sitting here right now. There's a little bit more in the woods. I collected everything I had room for. There's probably 30 to 50 gallons in the woods. So you can safely say we've got 900 gallons, which is basically 2.5 to 3 days of boiling. I do keep this door closed even though it's hot in here because I want this to not have a breeze blow past it. That cools it down. Got our front fan. As you can see, bubbling pretty good, which is what we want. All seems to be doing well in there. Our float box is doing good. And we got our back pan, which is bubbling right along. It's a happy little pan today. So that's how we fire up our evaporator, flood the evaporator, go through everything, and now we just keep feeding this until the front pan is sweet enough to start drawing off. And that's where this thermometer comes into play here. This thermometer, boiling water, if you calibrate it, which I did not today, boiling water is at 0. So at 7 technically is your syrup. I do put this upside down so I can read it from a standing position. It seems kind of funny, but that's why I do it. And we check it all with the hydrometer. So it all needs to be checked with the hydrometer before we actually declare a syrup. But this gets it really close, and then I can adjust with hydrometer from there. Okay, so this is our Smoky Lake finisher and bottler. One of the things that's very, very important is getting your syrup, when you're hot bottling it, up to somewhere between 185 and 190. And you can see that this is right about 185 right now, 184, 185. We want to get it up to 190, and then we can hot bottle it. And that's going to keep any mold from growing. So you want to make sure it's finished fully to the correct bricks, BRIX, and then we want to bring this up to 185 or 190. So we've been drawing off for a while now. Got a nice color in there. This is the Smoky Lake. The filter goes on the top, which is where that maple leaf design is. Right now I don't have the filter in there because we filtered when we came off. Went through 5 pre-filters and a cone filter. in our draw-off tank over here. And while we're over here, we'll look at this special thermometer. 0, when you have this calibrated correctly, is boiling water. So this is calibrated correctly. 0 is boiling water, 7 is syrup. We use a hydrometer to verify all of that. But that's how that works. I'll give you a hydrometer demo when I get a minute. Want to make sure we capture the ideal bottling temperature. And I actually have some of my glass sitting right up here on the evaporator. And that's going to warm it up. That way it doesn't cool down too fast as we're bottling it. We didn't have much of a problem last year with the mason jars. I did have a problem with some of the smaller bottles. A little bit of them had just a touch of mold, and it was really spotty. But the only thing I could figure is we bottled a couple times when it was really cold, and it went into cold jars. So I kind of figured that was the problem. Anyway, that's a couple things about bottling, and we'll continue on and show how to bottle. When you're bottling, you want to fill right up to the ring right here. And we just set them on the side for a little bit. And that helps with the sanitizing the lid. I wear work gloves because this is hot. There we are. That is a nice syrup right there. And we do these for gift bottles for people. We have people that like them, like to buy them from us for gifts. We try to do a few of the decoratives each batch. The glass is incredibly expensive. These larger ones that I'm filling now are $4 a bottle for us to buy. So, you know, we have to pass that on because that's an expensive investment. But they look nice for gifts. Pretty nice. Our most popular jar that we sell is the mason jar quartz. We actually do give people a slight break with those if they buy 4. So if they buy a gallon, we'll give them $2 off each bottle. These were a favorite. The Galone jugs, people really like these. They're nice, they pour nice, they look nice, and they're not as expensive as the Maple Leafs. this shows you a little bit of the difference between what the glass looks like, how the syrup looks in the glass, because that, see if we can put it up to the light here, that is the exact same syrup as this, and they look very different.